All right, welcome into the Slate, everybody. DraftKings show. You're tuning in right now on Twitter, a live stream from DK Nation, or you are on the DraftKings YouTube and Twitch pages. We join you until about 6 o'clock tonight, getting you set for a 9-game slate in the NBA. The NBA is back, final quarter of the season. We're making that final push here, that turn for home. Brendan Glasheen of DraftKings, Matt LaMarca, he wears many hats as well. He also contributes at DK. It's just the two of us for the next 30 minutes or so. LaMarca, what's up? How you been?
Great. I got a nice little, basically a week to recharge the batteries there with no NBA content. I know that there was other stuff going on. Mm-hmm. You know, people were getting into the NASCAR. You've been talking about golf. When there's no basketball, I take every opportunity to just relax for a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, if you're hardcore NBA, which I know you are, you're really reaching, I think, during the All-Star break to dive into other things. But, you know, I get it. College basketball is going on as well. NASCAR, like you said, golf. So a lot going on. We're going to spend most of our time here talking hoops with the NBA being back. There is a big game tonight. The two Los Angeles teams back from the break. Clippers, Lakers are two teams that do get a lot of attention, public attention, so we can spend some time there. Both of those teams are currently in the play-in tournament for the NBA. Well, it's not the postseason. It's technically the play-in tournament, which then leads to the postseason. So play-in tournament teams, weird to say, Lakers and Clippers. Some injury news as it relates to early games. We just got word that Malcolm Brogdon will be available to play tonight for the Pacers. We got some news on the Raptors. OG Anunoby has been ruled out. Fred VanVleet is expected to play. So anything that comes our way news-wise, we will be sure to deliver. And as always, be sure to drop your questions, your comments, your hot takes in the comments section over on YouTube and on Twitch. LaMarca, do you have a leadoff thought, something you feel really good about, or just a sizzler for us to get us started tonight?
No. I think that the most of the attention tonight, as my dogs start going crazy in the background, most of the attention tonight is going to be on what happens in Philadelphia, right? Or with Philadelphia.
Oh, I buried the lead. Good point. Yes, James Harden's debut.
Exactly. James Harden making his first appearance with the team. There's going to be, a lot of eyeballs on that situation. How does he coalesce with Joel Embiid, who has had a tremendous season, has emerged as the favorite to win the MVP award. And it's going to be interesting to see how those two guys gel. There's definitely going to be a growing period, I would imagine. There's going to be some feeling out, guys maybe being a little bit too passive, maybe trying to, fit in to the detriment of their team. But ultimately, I think it's a combination that's going to work, right? I mean, Joel Embiid has never played with a guy like James Harden, who is, that capable on the offensive end. So I'm gonna be very interested to seeing how this all works.
Yeah, and you can find James Harden's points prop on the DK Sportsbook at 21.5. The Sixers get the Timberwolves on the second night of a back-to-back. The Timberwolves are on the second night of a back-to-back. This would be the first game for the Sixers in the second half, and I'm pretty sure the line is still at 2.5 points. Yes, it is. Wolves are the dog at home. Sixers favored in this spot. So you make a good point. I mean, the last great player, some of you might think Ben Simmons is a great player. He could project to be a great player. Jimmy Butler is another player that Joel Embiid has played with, but nowhere close to the offensive magician that James Harden can be. Also, the fact that Harden, when warranted and when needed in his stops along his career, Thunder, Houston, Brooklyn, balls in his hands a lot. LaMarca, balls in his hands a lot. How do you feel he adjusts out of the gate? Because I feel, we talked about this briefly before we went live, I felt when he went to Brooklyn last year via trade, not mid-season, but a couple weeks into the year, month or two into the year, May have been a couple of weeks into the year now that I think about it, because the season I don't know. I can never remember because of COVID and how the whole freaking calendars changed in the NBA. But anyway, felt to me like Harden had something to prove, that he can be a team-oriented guy and be unselfish out of the gate.
Yeah, and that, I think, is the beauty of James Harden's game, right? He can take over as a scorer if you need him to, but he's also routinely among the league leaders in assists. And there's going to be, a little bit of, some give and take with him and Joel Embiid, because Embiid is another guy. He's a very high usage player. He needs the ball in his hands, but he might be able to do a little bit more, like traditional post up play, as opposed to, I'm going to grab the rebound and then bring it up the court and just take the offense over. So I think the days of point center Joel Embiid are probably in the past. But that's not a bad thing, right? Joel Embiid is the most dominant post player that we have in the league at this point. So getting him into a situation where he can just focus on scoring and do what he does best, dominate down low with the occasional, outside jumper mixed in. I think that's a very good thing for him.
Is there anything you'd look at props wise tonight, or are you in a wait and see mode with how this looks? Like, 9.5 assists for Harden tonight. It's a pretty steep number. It's at -1. It's juiced all the way up to -145 on the DraftKings Sportsbook. Take the under at +110.
Yeah, I think the question you have to ask yourself is, how many minutes do we expect James Harden to play tonight? Because you have to remember, he has, it's coming off a pretty extended absence here. So I will take the under on 9.5, but simply because I don't think he's going to see a full complement of minutes. I think as soon as we expect James Harden to be a full go, then, him getting double digits assists on a nightly basis seems very doable. But if we're going to limit him to maybe like 30 minutes or so tonight, maybe even a little bit fewer, I think it becomes a smart under wager.
Yeah, taking unders is not always very popular, because it's not as fun when you watch a game and you're rooting for limited statistics throughout the course of the game. But man, that's it's a big number for a debut, and I could go back and look and see how he did with the Nets, but I'm sure the Nets eased him in his first game as well. And look, for James Harden, getting 7 to 10 assists is not as much work as another point guard or a guard in the NBA. I think that's pretty understandable, as well as the fact that maybe we could also make the case is we talk about how Embiid has never played with a player like James Harden. Has James Harden ever played with a big like Joel Embiid in his career?
Harden's played with a lot of great players. He did play, with Dwight Howard in Houston. That was towards the tail end of Dwight Howard's prime, though. But James Harden has always
offensively.
Right. He was kind of cooked at that point.
Yeah. But Howard's not really skilled offensively like Embiid is.
I will not stand for any Dwight Howard slander. I think he was the biggest snub.
It's not slander, it's true.
He was the biggest snub from the NBA 75 best player team that was actually 76 players. I thought that Damian Lillard getting in over him was a travesty. Travesty, Brandon.
You serious?
Yes, I'm serious.
Okay, well, fine, whatever. Feel that way, but this isn't slander. Like, Joel Embiid, more skilled offensively than Dwight Howard, is not a sizzler.
Of course, you're right.
All
and James Harden has always had great chemistry with, rim running centers. He loves to get in the pick and roll, let the center, dive towards the hoop and throw alley-oops to him. Joel Embiid, not really that type of player.
Correct.
So it is going to be a bit of an adjustment for him.
For sure. So I feel you could make the argument both ways, that it's going to be new, but we think, just generally speaking, I think it's going to work. Like, I think the two of them are going to work well together, because everyone's wondering about Brooklyn and Philadelphia. Can the new pieces, not only can it work, but can they put it together in the final, whatever it is, 20, 25 games left in the season? That's the $1 million question.
Yep. And I feel better about the 76ers chances of doing it just because their players are available every night. Like the Nets, at least for the time being, don't have Kyrie Irving in home games, and Kevin Durant is still injured. It's hard to build chemistry when you are not playing together, not practicing. So Harden and Embiid, again, we expect some growing pains, but they are going to have, close to 30 games for them to kind of figure it out. And that should pay dividends come playoff time.
Here's a question for you, bigger picture stuff now. And there is a contest, of course, plenty of contests on DraftKings if you want to make a lineup for tonight, talking daily fantasy. I've got the Sixers pulled up here again in Minnesota tonight.
Minnesota.
Tonight, look at that. Like no Qs, no Ds for doubtful, just a very clean Sixers page.
Love it.
Who takes the biggest hit, though, because of the Harden addition? Like Maxey, I'm sure, Tobias Harris. Like, based on what we see here, in a week, maybe two, really might only take a week, salaries are going to change significantly for these other role players. So from a fantasy standpoint, who takes a hit with the addition of Harden in Philadelphia?
I mean, everybody takes a hit, but I think you're spot on with Harris and Maxey being the most impacted. I mean, Maxey is a guy who had been playing like upwards of 40 minutes a night recently. Very, very active player. And he simply doesn't have to do as much now that you have a ball dominant player like James Harden in the fold. And then Tobias Harris, instead of being the number 2 scoring option for the 76ers, albeit a distant number 2, well behind Joel Embiid, now he becomes the number 3. So I think that's a better role for Tobias Harris, like as far as winning ball games, right? You want him to be that sort of third piece. You don't want him to necessarily be your number 2 guy, but it's going to impact him from a fantasy standpoint.
Curious throughout the course of the second half, and really it's more so the final quarter of the season.
Yep.
Tobias Harris shooting the let me just see here real quick. His season, that 3-point percentage should go up. I would like to think 34.5, more spot up shooting opportunities, I think, with Harden here too.
Yeah, you would expect some open looks. I mean, you can't focus all your defensive energy on Joel Embiid and James Harden and then still be able to get to the shooter. So that to me is like the big question for the 76ers. I mean, another one of the big questions, right? They lost one of the game's best floor spacers in Seth Curry to make this trade happen. So do they have enough perimeter shooting without Seth Curry to keep defenses from packing the paint? I think the answer is yes. They still have Danny Green for whatever that's worth. They have Maxey, who is a very capable 3-point shooter. But if Harris can become, he was closer to 40% from 3-point range last season, 39.4%. If he can get back into that territory, then this offense becomes very, very impressive.
Yeah, I was just going to check that out. And that's last year they still had Horford. Or no, Horford was with the Thunder. So I'm just trying to envision what the lineup will look like. But over the course of his career, shooting the 3, like you said, last year, 39%. That was one of his best seasons. With the Clippers years ago, he shot it at 41%. But that wasn't as many games played. I think that might have been a year in which he was traded. Yeah, he was with the Pistons that year too. So he had a great year back in 2017-18, shooting the 3. So he hasn't had a big year since last when he shot 39. Year before
Tobias
that,
Harris
37.
Sneakily has played for like half the teams in the league.
Yeah, I know. I'm looking at it right now. Bucks, Magic, Pistons, Clippers. I remember the Clippers and the Pistons. I did not know he played for the Magic. Maybe I did know that. Makes sense.
I bet you have to be a real NBA head, and I only know this because Tobias is a Long Island guy. He went to Half Hollow Hills, so I have to stand for my fellow Long Island dudes. Same for Danny Green, by the way. 2 on the 76ers now. He's a North Bab kid. But drafted by the Bucks. I don't think that most people would know that.
He's drafted by the Bobcats.
Bucks.
Bobcats.
Tobias Harris?
Yeah, I mean, it's just Pro Basketball Reference says Bobcats.
Okay, well, all right.
No,
Draft and trade.
My bad. But just point being, the Bobcats still existed when he was in the league. Like, that's all I'm getting at. I mean,
there you go. So even diehard Long Island fan of Tobias Harris, Matt LaMarca, doesn't know that he was drafted by the Bobcats. I knew that his rookie year was with the Bucks, but I did not know it was a draft and trade.
That's wild. And he's 29 years old. Like, yeah, you'd think he's like 33 or at least 33, something like that. We have a question from Jerry in the Twitch chat. We mentioned Harris, Maxey. How about we're going deeper into the depth chart? How about Shake Milton? Like, what kind of impact does he hit? Does he now become like he might only get 8 to 10 minutes a night kind of thing?
No, I think he plays more than that, but I think he's, strictly an off the bench guy. Probably gives you somewhere from like maybe 15 minutes a night, 15 to 18. And he just comes in and he tries to fill that, like score as many points as you can off the bench type of role. That's what I think he kind of becomes for this team. Okay. Yeah, no, like they're a very top heavy squad now, right? You're going to see a lot of playing time for the big guys. Furkan Korkmaz stays in the mix. Thibault stays in the mix. Milton stays in the mix. But I think that overall, like that's kind of where you can cap it out as sort of like a solid 8-man rotation.
Okay, so a lot of dissection of the James Harden addition to the Sixers. Right now, Philadelphia is 35-23, 3 games back of the Bulls for first in the East. The East is very clumped together. It's a wide open race, it feels like, from 1 till about 7 as of right now. With the Raptors 5.5 back, the Nets are 8 back. They're in the play-in as of right now. Yes, I think the Nets are going to stay right there, to be honest. I think the Nets are going to be a play-in team the way this year is going. Again, folks, they play 82 games. We only have 22 left. Like, we're not at the halfway mark. All-Star break is not really the halfway point. We have like a quarter of the season left. Yeah. So this is a sprint here to the finish. This is a conversation that's come up quite a bit here the last week or two, really since the Harden trade. Celtics went out and got Derek White. The Bucks made some tweaks with Ibaka. They lose DiVincenzo. Cavs get LeVert. Bulls and Heat don't do anything. The Nets, of course, they get Simmons, and Irving should be playing more. All that being said, as it pertains to the Atlantic Division, do you have a developing take on the sports book? It relates to the Sixers. They are minus 200, clear favorite to win the Atlantic Division. Celtics are at plus 300, and they split the season series. Celtics are only a game and a half back. Is there any value? Like the Raptors are plus 700. You're getting a 4-digit number on the Nets. I think if you have any interest in those other 3 teams, you wait and see if Philly gets off to a slow-ish start with Harden if they can't figure it out right away. But you may have missed your window if you wanted to bet one of those other teams, because I think the value's gone.
Now, I like the net. I like the Celtics at plus 300.
Okay. I'm going to pull it up right now. So go ahead.
Boston is a team that I think is better than the traditional or the casual basketball fans realize. I like to look at net rating, right, which measures just points per 100 possession, points allowed per 100 possession. What's the difference? So the Celtics, despite sitting in 6th place in the East, they are 4th in the entire NBA in terms of net rating. The only 3 teams that have been better this year are the Suns, the Warriors, and the Jazz, who I think most people agree are the 3 best teams in the league. Maybe the Jazz, if you don't want to put them in that category, that's fine. But they've been the 3 best teams in basketball this year.
Anytime you're in the conversation with Phoenix and Golden State this year, that's pretty good company.
Yes. And I thought that getting Derek White was one of the more underrated moves of the trade deadline. Derek White is a really capable player, and it just gives them another option. There was a lot of talk about, is the Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum combination, is that good enough long term? Should they break it up? I still think they have 2 excellent young players in those guys in their prime. They've taken the team to the Eastern Conference Finals twice. I am certainly not ready to call that experiment a failure. So I would just be looking to better build around those two players. And I think that bringing in Derek White is a good step. Can they make up the difference on the 76ers? I certainly think it's possible if the 76ers stumble a little bit here while they're coming together following this trade.
Yeah, that's my only thinking. Maybe the Sixers. Well, you could also. I should counter argue. Maybe the Sixers get off to a great start. I think I misspoke. If the Sixers get off to a great start with Harden and Embiid, and maybe those odds lengthen, and the market overreacts to how they look, and then you get the Celtics at a better number. That was my.
Regardless, the Celtics are a team that I am interested in long term. I think that their futures basically across the board are underpriced at the moment. And I know that, you know, I am like the furthest thing from a Boston homer. I know we have a few of those here at DraftKings. Trust me, I got the New York beanie on. Okay. I'm just looking at the numbers. I'm looking at the young talent on this team. And it's a team that I expect to continue to get better. So I like Boston. Maybe not to win the title. That feels like a bit of a jump, but I don't see why they can't win this Eastern Conference if Brooklyn stays sort of in a state of disarray.
Yeah, and if you like the Nets and you think they're going to put it together for this season, like I wouldn't touch the Nets to win the division. Like there's not enough time. There's not enough time. They're not going to get there. So don't get silly. But even the conference, like I think you're better off waiting on the Nets at plus 245. Like that number could very well come down, especially with the rise of the Bucks, who I feel like are being underrated still as defending champions. If the Sixers, like I said, they figure it out right away and Harden comes in motivated, like we've talked about. If the Celtics stay red hot, Miami tends to play their best basketball of the year at this time of year. So if you like the Nets,
are in first place right now.
I know, but if
this is the best Eastern Conference, top to bottom, that we have seen in a long time. And I think it should make for very exciting playoffs. I'm excited.
Basically pre-LeBron getting really, really good, which was, I know his rookie year, but look, here comes the Boston homer in me. Even then, the Celtics, those Celtics Pistons games in 2008, like you got to go back a long time to your point when the East was this balanced and deep, 1 through 6, 1 through 7.
Yep.
And even if you don't think like the Cavs are for real, all right, take the Cavs out, put the Nets in, right? Just picks. There are 7 teams, 6 to 7 teams in the East. You could make a case to win the league this year.
Yeah, and I still like Toronto for what it's worth. I don't think they're good enough to win the conference, but I think they're a good basketball team. So I think that the East really does go 8 deep right now. Yeah, and it's awesome.
The concern with the Raptors, we can actually get into tonight's slate because there is Raptors news. Nick Nurse, Matt Meiselman has brought this up a ton. Some folks at the Action Network I work with too. He's playing these guys too many minutes. Like the Raptors, Nick Nurse like runs these guys into the ground. Like I get it. They're making a push. They're trying to get in the top 6. They're trying to stay out of the play-in. Like it's admirable stuff. They got Siakam late in the year, but no Anunoby tonight. Birch is going to start. Van Vliet will play, but these guys play so many minutes, LaMarca. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. It's definitely a bit of a throwback. It's a little bit out of the Tom Thibodeau school of coaching, right? We need to get the most out of our starting lineup. I do think, again, if you want to talk about underrated trade deadline additions, Thad Young for the Raptors, a guy who really didn't get a chance to play with San Antonio earlier this year because they're kind of focused on the youth movement. They're rebuilding, but Thad Young is a baller. He can play. And I think adding him into that rotation is a big deal. It gives them another guy. So instead of having to play Siakam and OG and Scotty Barnes, instead of having to lean on those guys for 40 minutes a night, maybe now you can trim them down to like 36 and you give Thad 20, 24 minutes off the bench. So I love that as a player. I'm excited to see what he can bring to this team. He's already had an impact in granted limited minutes, very limited minutes, but the Raptors have increased their net rating by plus 7.2 points per 100 possessions with Thad on the court.
And Thad Young tonight, 3,600 on DraftKings. Just
love him.
Love him tonight?
Yeah, with no OG, absolutely, I love him.
Some pretty impressive game logs as of late as well, pre-All-Star break. Where you got to remind me, where was he before?
He was in San Antonio. Right. He was acquired as part of, I don't remember exactly what deal it was that sent him to San Antonio, but he just didn't play because the Spurs are, in that rebuilding mode, and they didn't really need to get anything out of Thad Young. So they held him until the trade deadline, which was smart, shipped him for a first round pick. But, last year he was in Chicago and he was a great player off the bench from them, started from time to time. Fantasy wise, he's always capable of going over a fantasy point per minute. So if you think he gets a few extra minutes tonight with no OG, that looking like a snack.
There you go. There it is. Once again, we'll take your questions. We have about 5 minutes because we got to wrap with Madden coming up next after this. So LaMarca, let's spend these next 5 minutes to really break down what you like tonight on the slate. Some other news that has popped up here. Josh Giddey out tonight for the Thunder, hip injury. He's been ruled out against the Pacers.
Sure, it's a hip injury.
Oh, okay. Well,
sounds like a case of tankitis.
Okay. Wow. LaMarca's very passionate about that. I mean, oh, I see. With tanking. Yeah. Well, hey, you know something? My counter to that. I liked the Cavs last night as part of a team-oriented money line parlay pick, and the Pistons won outright. The Pistons are so annoying. Pistons, winners of 2 straight, by the way.
Hey, don't sleep on Cade over this last stretch. I think, again, another thing, just sort of talking about second half storylines, I'm excited to see Cade Cunningham, Jalen Green, like outside of like Evan Mobley has been great for the Cavs, but he's like a role player, right? Same with Josh Giddey, same with Scotty Barnes. I think that this class is missing like the true star at this point. And maybe one of those other guys can become it, but I think Cade is still the most logical candidate to become a star player out of this class. He won the MVP of the Rising Stars Challenge during All-Star Weekend. I think Cade is about to go on one. I think he's about to really start to spread his wings here for the Pistons.
The Pistons aren't playing tonight. Pistons played last night.
They're not
on the second night of the back-to-back. I was just curious Mobley's going to win Rookie of the Year. We think Mobley's the favorite. Can you get Cade on any Rookie of the Year? Just to take a look, just for fun.
I believe you can. Awards there up at the top. So
there it is. Yes, you're much. What's the word? You are way. Is it more calm or calmer? You're more calm. You are more calm than some other people that do this show that are like, it's this way, go that way on the sports book. Steve Buchanan. Missed that guy, kind of. Where's Cade?
Wow,
there he is.
Mobley has gone to minus 750. I know Mobley has been good, but to me, a lot of the hype around Mobley was because the Cavs got off to such a great start. Like, if you look at Mobley's numbers, they're nice. They're very solid. I don't think that he deserves to be a minus 750 favorite at the moment. So I definitely think getting a little sprinkle of Cade at plus 800 makes sense to me, right? When it comes to awards like Rookie of the Year, Sixth Man, a lot of the times it just comes down to who has the best stats, right? And Cade Cunningham has the chance to put up the best counting stats over these last 20 some odd games.
And what's possible too, well, we think, except last night, and the Pistons played the Cavs, but in theory, the Pistons are going to lose on purpose, maybe. The Cavs aren't going to try and lose on purpose because they're trying to get a playoff spot. They're trying to have JB Bickerstaff, I felt, was a good pick at the break to get for Coach of the Year. With the injury to Chris Paul, Monty Williams, that could set them back a bit. Not to say Monty's not a great coach. If anything, it could help Monty's odds if he does well, or shorten his odds if indeed the Suns keep playing well without Chris Paul. But I figured, all right, well, if the Cavs keep this going here with all the moving parts, with Rubio in, Rubio out, LeVert in, Garland having his best year, Mobley. But all that being said, if the Cavs do miss the playoffs, that could make the case for Cade. Like, well, we can look to another guy who's not going to make the playoffs. And like you said, best player, best stats. He could go off for a great second half. What about on the board for the 9-game slate? Do you have a favorite pick before we get going?
Yeah, the bet that I wrote up for the NBA cheat sheet article over on DK Nation was I had Heat minus 5. It is now at 5.5. I still think that's fine. The Knicks are bad, and the Heat are good.
RJ Barrett is available to play, and I think
that does matter a bit, but it's not a huge factor for me. I was actually looking at some of the on-court, off-court numbers this season, and the Knicks have decreased their net rating by 9.3 points per 100 possessions with Barrett on the floor. So they've actually been worse with RJ Barrett on the court this season than with him off. So him being in the lineup does not dissuade me from liking the Heat. The Knicks as a home dog this season are just 3-5 against the spread. I have no problem laying the wood here with Miami.
Okay, very good. Now, no Kemba, of course, no Derrick Rose.
Yeah.
Who's the point guard?
Burks. Yeah, I think that they have a few guys that they like. They're going to use Alec Burks. They're going to use Quentin Grimes. They're going to use Emmanuel Quickly. Miles McBride could see some run over the stretch, down the stretch here. So they're in a situation where Kemba has kind of become the scapegoat for this team, and he's been bad. There's no denying it. The net rating numbers suggest that Kemba has been a huge problem for the Knicks this season, but he hasn't been nearly as big of a problem as Julius Randle, unfortunately. So, as usual, the Knicks, they took a nice, 4th place finish last year, and then they decided we're just going to throw cash at everything, and we're going to try and fix it, and build it up in 1 year. And as usual, they have failed miserably and are now in a terrible salary cap situation. And things look as bad as they always do for the Knicks. Rant over.
Yeah, well, hey, they got one thing going for them. They've crushed the souls of the Celtics this year. Those losses, someone who is backing Celtics over 46.5 wins, they should get there now. But if they don't, I look back on that Pistons game before the break in those 2 Knicks games.
Evan Fournier, man.
Yeah.
Spiteful. He's a spiteful man against the Celtics, apparently.
Definitely. Okay, we need to get going. Everyone have a great weekend. Be safe. LaMarca, good to talk to you as always. Great stuff.
Always a pleasure.
You can find him over on the DraftKings playbook. He's got everything written up for tonight's NBA slate. 9-gamer, best bets. Do you have a DFS article up today or no?
Not on DK Nation, but you can find it out there.
Okay, just search his name on whatever machine you like to use, Google or whatever, and you can find it somewhere. Thanks to Eamon and Daniel behind the scenes. That is going to do it for us. Oh, the next sim is Texans Saints. I have not said that in a long time. The next sim coming up, Texans Saints.
What is this? The early birds? No, 4:00 was the early bird special. What was 6:00?
I don't know. I'm the wrong guy. You got the Friday sub guy in today. The substitute didn't get those on the planning sheet for today. All right, that's it for us. Thanks for tuning into the Slate Happy Hour. There it is. Very good.
Yeah.
Enjoy the Happy Hour sim, everybody, or whatever you want to call it. Catch you all again on Monday with the Sweat at 11 a.m. And of course, this show will follow the 4:00 Madden sim. We'll see you.